In the Glencairn half full, half empty, yet the half full bit of it is we're in a really good place. There has never been so much choice. The glass half empty element of it is
one of the greatest whiskey writers of our time.
He's the expert on whiskey, educator and speaker. Dave has been writing about drink for over 30 years.
If you could introduce someone to whiskey with just one bottle.
We're going down this route because their palate's already attuned to that.
That's such a good point.
But it also turned out into this kind of map of mindset. Japanese distillers are influencing Scotch distillers. Those whiskies made by winemakers compared to the ones made by former brewers, there's a real stylistic difference between them.
What are you actually drinking at home?
I would definitely have...
Yeah, why are you here in New Zealand?
Why am I here? I'm here in New Zealand for Dramfest. I come out every couple of years. It's just one of the great shows in the world to be here. It's just a wonderful atmosphere, always great people, always really new, exciting whiskies. Yeah, I just love coming out here.
So overall, where would you say the whiskey world is heading? And like, where do you think? What's the direction of things? You've probably got. That some of you might not know that, Dave, you went like all around the world to all these different distilleries, including tiny little New Zealand ones.
Including tiny little New Zealand ones,
and I feel like you more than probably, I can't really think of anyone else, do you feel like you've got a bit more of a bigger picture of where it is, where whiskey's going?
Yeah, conceivably I have. I've just been brought a dram. Thank you very much. Yeah, maybe I do. I mean, the advantage of doing a third edition of the World Atlas of Whisky means that, I was contacting friends. I wasn't doing this all on my own. I was contacting friends and saying, right, what is hot in your country? Because we don't get everything in the UK. But I think in general terms, whisky is in a really good place in terms of diversity of flavour, in terms of diversity of approach, a really interesting mindsets with distillers. So I think, in the Glencairn half full, half empty, yet the half full bit of it is we're in a really good place. And as whiskey lovers and whiskey drinkers, there has never been so much choice.
Yeah.
And there's never been so much great whiskey being made. The glass half empty element of it is there's too much.
Yeah.
There's severe oversupply at the moment.
Yeah.
The market is going through one of its kind of 20-year cycles, and it's in a dip, undoubtedly. But I think once we come out of the dip, there's probably going to be fewer distilleries, there's going to be casualties, but I think the quality and the diversity will still be there, if not even greater than it was in the past. So kind of tough times at the moment, but at the same time really exciting ones.
There's a lot that goes into these videos, and they're only really possible with my sponsors. That's why I'm grateful for today's sponsor, which is Pre-Alcohol by ZBiotics. And if you people know that I'm a big fan of drinking responsibly, quality over quantity, and drinking for the flavour, not just for the buzz. That said, it can sneak up on you, especially if I'm going to a whiskey tasting, a whiskey festival. So to stay on top of things, I do three things. I get lots of sleep, hydrate, and I sometimes have a Pre-Alcohol by ZBiotics. It's a genetically engineered probiotic made by PhD scientists designed to break down the byproduct of alcohol that builds up in your gut. And that byproduct is what can leave you feeling off the next day. So if you want to try it, click on the link in the description for 15% off, free shipping, and if you're still not really sure, they do also have a money back guarantee. Back to whiskey.
Sorry for that dose of reality.
No, I totally agree. There does seem to be this thing, and you're also getting there's this movement. People looking more into their health and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I guess for me personally, one of the things that drew me to whiskey is that quality over quantity. Rather than having a box of beers, have one nice dram.
Exactly.
And that's the way I always approach it. And I think that's kind of a different way to drink, especially in New Zealand culture where it's hard to separate being drunk and drinking, and actually and it's kind of what I learned when I lived in London. You go to France and stuff, and they have it a wine with glass. Dinner and that sort of thing. I saw recently in one of your interviews you talked about how a lot of these distillers you've seen around the world, a lot of them have beer backgrounds and wine backgrounds. So how do you feel like that's affecting the whiskey they make? And
hugely. I think it kind of was brought home when I was in the US, in West Coast US, which is kind of home to the American craft brewing scene. And talking to distillers there, the way that they were talking about the whiskey, the way they were talking about the process, is that because they're brewers, they're thinking of barley, they're thinking of the grain itself, they're thinking of different roasts, they're thinking of mashing, they're thinking of fermentation. So all of their thinking is kind of this front end You know, how do you build in, how do you maximize flavor of the distillate right at the start of the process? And you taste their whiskies and you go, yes, I know these flavors because they're kind of beer flavors, they're whiskey flavors, but they're kind of beer flavors in there.
Right.
And then it was actually coming down here because there are so many winemakers here in Australia. So many winemakers are kind of drifting into whiskey. You know, Sarah's doing it. Cardrona, for example, would be one. And there's a winemaker's palate. You know, and a winemaker's palate is looking at elegance and finesse and blending. You know, the idea of blending, and it's almost like the end of the process. It's about building this gentleness, building this elegance, and I began then looking at the whiskies made by winemakers, and I think there is a style. I think there's they're not all the same, but I think when you compare those whiskies made by winemakers compared to the ones made by former brewers, there's a real stylistic difference between them.
Interesting.
And it's going to be a really intriguing one to follow up. You know, and the huge number of distillers in France now around cognac.
Right.
Using
Interesting.
cognac stills, and the cognac mentality really is about, let's think about the wine to begin with.
Okay.
And you're also beginning to see that kind of winemaker palette coming through on a lot of these cognac whiskey distilleries. Yeah.
So when you say think about the wine, but how do they do that with barley? Are they putting the same stuff in the barley, or is it, how is that translated?
Yeah. So also, you know, this is a kind of global trend at the moment.
Right, yeah.
That people are looking at barley as being a
Almost
flavor,
like
as a flavor contributor.
Yeah.
Whereas
Interesting.
essentially since the 1980s, barley has been there as the provider of alcohol.
Yeah.
And now distillers going back to inefficient barley varieties, so fewer litres of alcohol per tonne of barley, but maximising the flavour as a result. And if you take a hit on efficiency in preference of flavour, fine. You know, and a lot of them are just going, fine.
Yeah.
I'd rather have flavour in my whiskey than a thin result. So
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many
So interesting.
really fantastic and fascinating things happening at the moment.
You know, one really interesting thing, because you know, when I first got into whiskey, there's that stage people get past. You know, one of my most viewed videos is how to get past the whiskey burn.
Yeah.
Because it's often the first thing, like, I like it, but it's very burning. And so I sort of gave a few tips and stuff. My wife, like, I've gone through the flavour tree. I've tried, because I went through the smoky, Lafroig 10 is what got me into whiskey. Then I meet my brother-in-law, it's this heavy sherry cask stuff, and then someone else will be the kind of light second fill ex-bourbon cask. Nothing's worked on her. I've tried everything. Until I gave her, there were two whiskies. One was a whiskey from Morris in Australia that have a fortified wine background.
Yeah.
And she was like, because it almost has this port element, and that's kind of been her gateway.
Yeah.
And it's almost like there's now new doors. Almost like it's
That's
kind of what I've
fascinating.
seen.
Yeah. I think the Morris whiskies are great.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a huge fan of, you know, of the wines themselves. Yeah, and it's, you know, it's a bit like, you know, when I'm doing, you know, and by the way, I love the flavour tree. I think it's a touch of genius. That, you know, the first question, you know, if I'm doing bartender training, you know, the first question is, what, you know, you want a whiskey, but what do you normally drink? You know, so we, as whiskey lovers, we've got to take that step towards the drinker and find out where they are and what they're comfortable with, because a lot of it's a lack of confidence. You know, I don't understand this drink. It's baffling. There's too many of them, and you know. But by asking, right, what would you normally drink? And they go, and they say wine. Okay, right. Red wine or white wine? I drink white wine. Okay, what grape variety? You know, do you like Chardonnay? Do you like Riesling or Sauvignon Blanc? And they go, Riesling. Okay, right. We're going down this route, so we're going down to Linkweed, you know, for example, or the Glenfiddich, or something that's lighter, fresher, etc., because their palate is already attuned to that.
That's such a good point.
You know, and if you are a Shiraz drinker, you can steer people towards bigger, heavier, perhaps sherried styles. So all of these elements, you're trying to give people confidence and tune their existing palate into the palate of whiskey. But you're absolutely right. A lot of people will find it hard because it's strong.
Yeah.
It's strong and it does firm.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with adding water to it. There's nothing wrong
Yeah.
with making it into a highball. There's
Exactly.
nothing wrong with putting it in a cocktail. It is a drink.
Especially this recent. yeah,
It's
yeah.
a drink.
It is a drink.
It's a
At the end of the day,
complex
it's a
drink.
drink.
It's a wonderful drink, but it's just a drink. you know?
Especially the summer that's just been in New Zealand. Like I was probably having more old fashions than there was neat actually.
Yeah.
So at the end of a day, and we were living by the beach, and it just worked really well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the highball. And it's
me
something
too.
that's lower in alcohol, really refreshing.
Yeah.
Fantastic drink.
A little bit of lime, but yeah,
Great.
so good. So the Atlas,
Yeah,
you've done several editions of it.
3. Yeah.
You've done 3 editions of it, and you've now done an updated version. So what is it, and what did you hope to achieve with the book?
Essentially, so the second edition came out 10 years ago.
Okay, lots changed then probably.
And we were always talking about doing it another one, but then other projects got in the way, and then COVID got in the way, and production, publishing schedules were all screwed up. So it took a long time to actually get started on the 3rd edition, which isn't an update; it's a rewrite. Because
Oh right, yes.
so much has happened. No, and I'm not telling you off. But it's so much has happened in the
Yeah,
past
definitely.
decade. So much happened in the last 7 years, to be honest. It was impossible just to kind of go, oh well, they've just because there's new countries, new distilleries. So
Yeah.
a complete rewrite, a rejig, no more pages, but kind of redesign. Twice as many distilleries profiled, 3 times, 4 times as many whiskies tasted. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. It was fascinating. It
Yeah.
took a while.
I bet. I have huge respect for it because I'm like, the one thing I can't do well is the written stuff. I can do the video stuff. The rest of the idea, I have no idea how you even start with writing a book. So from all the things in the book, was anything that kind of stood out as slightly weird or kind of like it's something really interesting? You're like, well, I didn't realize that. Anything
Yeah, I mean, countries that I didn't know made whiskey suddenly appearing. Like a friend, and this is why friends around the world were so important. A friend got in touch. Oh, you're doing a new atlas. Did you know there's this guy making whiskey in Ho Chi Minh City? And then I was going, it's strangely enough, no, and it's this mad American expat,
Yeah.
making whiskey over there.
Yeah, right.
Whiskey distillery suddenly popped up in Uruguay, at the very, very last minute. So yeah, I think that was really exciting. Suddenly discovering I think there's now 15 distilleries in Italy, and most people, I would say, out with Italy, probably thought there was 1.
Yeah. True.
So
Yeah.
uncovering all of this, there's 150 plus whiskey distilleries in France now.
Yeah.
So
Isn't
all of that is kind of boom, and it's I can't fit them all in. So
Yeah.
So the next question was, who has to be included? So the big guys have to be included. The ones that people know and love, but at the same time of the extraordinary plethora of distilleries. How do you find out the ones who are really pushing the category forward, which is what it kind of came down to. But it was amazing because I describe it as being, because it's an atlas, it's a map, so it's telling you where a distillery is. It's always been about flavour.
Yeah.
So what is the distillery doing, but why are they doing it, and what flavours are coming out of it. But it also turned out into this kind of map of mindsets, the way in which Japanese distillers are influencing Scotch distillers, the way that distillers in New Zealand are coming up and actually thinking in the same way as a distiller in the middle of America or Norway or whatever. See, these kind of threads of kind of production-led or philosophic stances or understanding of place just begin to kind of thread together. So, and that's what made it exciting for me. If it was just a matter of writing down, right, this is how big the mash tun is, and this is what the angle of the line arm is, it becomes a really boring book.
Yeah.
But when you actually speak to the people who are making it and ask them why they're making it in that way, then you begin to you get more of a global map.
Yeah. And
yeah.
the story sort of almost behind the distilleries and these people who have decided to start a business, which, you look a lot, probably not so much in the new world, but old world, like where they first released 3, 4, like it's a long time before you start your first product. It's kind of a wild business model.
If you can turn a profit, if you can break even after 10 years, you're doing well.
Yeah.
Seriously, that's how long it is. And that is laying down stock and buying more stock, laying down more stock than you possibly need, because you got to plan long term. It's an insane business model.
It is. Yeah, it's just wild.
You imagine going to your bank manager and going, I've got this idea for a business. Okay, yeah. So it's going to lose money for about a decade, but then it's going to be okay. Yeah,
We're going to buy this big pot still, and we're going to hire 10 people.
Yeah. I mean, it's
And when
insane. It's utterly insane. But thank God there are dreamers out there. But at the same time, if you're starting a distillery, you have to have a business brief. You have to have a hard-assed financial director
I bet.
who's going to go no at some point, because you cannot just build the business on dreams, sadly.
And I found that with when distilleries can sort of hone in on like they at the start they do a lot of experimentation, and then. Because I imagine it's because you're almost creative. They probably always want to do weird and wild things.
Yeah, boom.
But sometimes you need, and I think say Aaron's done this quite well. Like here's the 10-year-old, here's the sherry cask, here's the cask strength, and you sort of find those cool releases, and then you do the special ones on the side. I
didn't know. I couldn't agree more. I think the distilleries, and you do see it sadly, who do that scattergun approach because they're really excited about what they're making. And there's a new release every week, and people are just going, but what are you making? And it's expensive, and I can't afford it. Just tell me what you do. Tell me what you're doing. And retailers are going, well, my shelves aren't infinitely expandable. I can't take all of these. So, from a business point of view, it doesn't make any sense. So yeah, I agree. Having a core expression that says, this is what my distillery character is.
Yeah.
This is what my I'm sitting here.
Here.
And then
you look at the different hats and different costumes.
Then you can play around that. But no, don't confuse people.
So speaking of flavours, people might wonder, behind these kind of whiskey writers and stuff, what whiskies are you like? What are you actually drinking at home? What are those whiskies on the shelf? I mean, you probably just have all sorts of things and
I've
stuff.
got a few.
But if you were to choose, say, from the flavour tree, something, do you have some perma-shelf ones that the bottle's run out? I think I'll get another bottle. Like something rich in spice, often sherry casks, something fruit and floral, often ex-bourbon, peat smoke. What would, any top of your head, not the best whiskey, just something?
No. I mean, I would find it very hard. I think I mentioned it earlier. I would find it very hard to live without Linkwood. I just think Linkwood or Altmore. Altmore is kind of in that fragrant character, but with beautiful mouthfeel. I think that I would definitely have that. I would definitely have something either Springbank or Ardnamurchan in that kind of West Coast oily style. I would, what else? Mortlach, quite definitely would be in there, giving a little bit of grunt and a little bit, a bit of meatiness. And then you have the rest of the world to play in. I would always have single pot still from Ireland. It's just one of the world's great styles. I would always have something like Jimmy Red, which is a single corn variety whiskey. They call it bourbon because people don't understand. It's just corn, and it's just mad. It's this heritage corn variety that delivers spice and sweetness, and it's mind blowing. It's brilliant. I'd probably have Todd Leopold's 3-chamber still, which is
3-chamber.
Yeah, a 19th century still. It became obsolete essentially post-Prohibition. But it's how all American rye whiskey was made. And it's insanely inefficient. It's a really stupid way of making whiskey. But it pulls out so much oil from the grain. The result is that like a rye whiskey you've never tried before. It's floral and it's oily and it's just utterly delicious. So yeah, and that's top of my head. As I said,
how interesting. There's someone going to seek out there. Are there any sort of whiskey myths out there that you think you commonly come across people and that people believe?
I would say one of the myths is you should only ever drink it neat. Whiskey should never be mixed or can never be mixed. Completely untrue. And I think that the myth that really needs to be exploded is whiskey is a man's drink.
Yeah.
It's a drink for everyone.
It is.
And the whiskey industry is doing brilliantly in terms of being so more inclusive, but whiskey is still a pretty gendered drink, and that needs to change.
And
It's everyone.
I mean, even before I got into whiskey, I sort of thought it was a snobby drink. And then you get into it and everyone's just so nice. Everyone's so nice. Because I guess you're meeting around a drink, which is a social, alcohol is a social thing.
Yeah, it's a
thousands of
social
years.
drink. It's a democratic drink. I think that's a great thing, and I think that's why I hate these. I really hate. I'm concerned at this idea that whiskey is only a luxury product, which immediately kind of says it's an elite product and it's not for you. Whiskey's success around the world is the fact that it is democratic. That you can go into a bar and you could be standing, you could be finishing work on a building site and you're standing next to a high court judge, but you both love whiskey and you will talk to each other as equals. And that is whiskey's greatest quality. That ability to bring people together. Yeah,
I totally agree. If you could introduce someone to whiskey with just one bottle, like what would you be going to?
I mean, because your first whiskey was Lafroig 10.
Well, I've tried other whiskies. I had a mate gave me a Craig Gallagher 13. Hated it. Thought it was disgusting.
Yeah.
I actually love it now. It's one of my favorites. Superior Michelle.
Awesome drunk.
But it was Lafroig 10 that was. I was like,
the-
there's something here. This reminds. It's like smoky. It reminds me of Marmite. And it almost hid the burn, almost the piece or something.
Sure.
And that just opened its door. Then you try Lagavulin and went with my mates around Isla and stuff. And then I was just hooked. I just fell down the rabbit hole. Yeah.
Down the rabbit hole.
I want to try all the different things. And then you have these stages where like, I only want to have sherry bombs.
Yeah.
And then you come around like, actually, I like the subtle complexity, you sort of bring it back a little bit.
I think a lot of people do that. I think a lot... The great thing, when Diageo launched Classic Malts, or UD launched Classic Malts, long time ago, in the 90s, 6 whiskies, from around Scotland, all different styles. And the thinking, which was logical, was that most people, the majority of people would drink Glenkinchie or maybe Oban. And only mad people would ever go as far as Lagavulin.
Yeah.
And the complete reverse happened.
Yeah, I found this so many of my mates.
Yeah.
It's
It's
I
all-
give them one of the two. I guess it depends what you. I don't know if it's something the cuisine you grew up with as a kid. Maybe you have lots of smoky barbecues.
Yeah,
or-
it could be. And I think it's also that confidence thing.
Right.
That if you can turn around and pick up that glass and go, it's smoky. Oh my God, I understand it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think there's a macho thing in there as well. Like always ordering the hottest curry.
Yeah. Right.
Or using eating the hottest chili and make the
Yeah.
So I think there's that element. But what you were saying about, as your palate matures and you begin to understand all the branches of the tree, that I think you become more predisposed to things which are gentle and subtle and refined and stuff. It's a bit like in wine drinking, where you start off with big whites, big reds, and eventually you'll go Pinot Noir and Riesling are just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. Over time, it just takes a lot of practice. Is when you're sipping on those whiskeys, suddenly you go back to an old whiskey and you can get flavors you didn't get before. But this has been an awesome chat. We could probably chat for 3 hours.
We probably could.
This has been it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm glad I could catch you while you're here.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. Do check where can I get your book? He's asked me to do this, by by the minute.
It should be widely available. Hopefully independent booksellers, quite definitely online. And please buy it. Have a family to feed.
Yeah, I know the feeling. It's been an absolute pleasure. Someone that I aim to communicate about whiskey. You're kind of like gold standard.
There you go.
So it's nice.
Well,
that
I think you're
something
doing
came.
brilliant stuff. Absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me on.
Appreciate it. Sláinte.
Pleasure.